Let's look at the parable of automatic growth, which can also be called the parable of spontaneous growth. This parable complements the parables of the mustard seed and the leaven, which were the last two parables we looked at. Parables of the sower and the wheat and weeds are discouraging because they are consumed by weeds, or other theologies of man. We only saw one heart that was good in the parable of the sower, and 3 hearts that were bad. Then we saw how the weeds, or wrong theologies, preaching and reasoning, can enter into us if we allow them to, and become like weeds in our hearts and minds. But now we see that the gospel of Jesus Christ is really the power of God working in us automatically. Jesus is showing us here that the growth has more to do with the gospel inside of us than it has to do with us. All growth is due to the seed, which is the gospel, or the truth of God working in us mightily. This is why it is so necessary for us to feed ourselves with the gospel truth. The parables of the mustard seed and leaven showed us how it then increases inside of us. In this parable of automatic growth, we've presumably now received gospel truth in us and we are healthy and prosperous, and the gospel seed just continues to grow in us spontaneously. The parable talks about us just going to sleep at night, and it continues to grow and develop and mature in us by itself. The parable even says we don't know how it happens. The fact is, it is God working in us. As Paul says in Philippians, it is God who has not only begun a good work in us, but continues to complete it in us. This is the way of the gospel when we let it be planted into us. You don't need to understand everything about electricity to experience it. So it is with the gospel. As human beings, living in flesh, we are just stagnant, until the power of God in the gospel goes to work in us. I call it centrifugal and synergistic. It goes haywire and produces all types of good things from us. Similarly, you don't need to understand everything about the gospel to experience it at work in you. It takes a while to understand the gospel, and Jesus left a lot of explaining about the gospel to the Apostle Paul. And Peter says some of Paul's writings are hard to understand. Many preachers only say that the gospel is about salvation. This is very important. But salvation is only one of at least 9 aspects of the gospel to understand. A lot of the explanation of the gospel is found on this site under coaching videos. The gospel is a divine reality that is controlled by God Himself working in us. As far as we are concerned, it is all automatic because it is God doing it in us. This is a message of the Gospel Coach.